Gregory Wolf,
Here.
Michael David Perderis. And he is on Zoom. Michael, can you hear us? He's unmuted. He is on Zoom with us. Kelly Rast, present. Brad Miller.
Present.
Lindsay Grisey. Frederick Starrett.
Starrett will do.
Starrett.
That's fine. Present.
Stephen McGinnick.
Present.
Timothy Orick. Not present. Lindsay Hind.
Leslie, I'm present.
It's okay. That's my name too. I don't know why Leslie Hind, Craig Connell,
Here.
and Andrew Logan.
Present.
Thank you. And that's.
All right, we next have public comment. Is there any public comment? I understand no one present in the room. Anyone by Zoom,
Would you like me to read the hybrid statement first,
if you would, please.
Vice Chair? Thank you. This meeting is now being recorded. Please silence all electronic devices. Please note, this meeting is being held in the board hearing room with Planning Commission members attending in person. There's also an option for virtual attendance on Zoom webinar. If you are using Zoom, you may participate in the meeting using your computer, telephone, or electronic device. For Zoom participants, chat will be disabled once the meeting begins. If you have trouble, please call 913-715-1700. If you would like to speak, please use the raise hand function in the Zoom app to notify planning staff of your desire to speak. To activate this function, click raise hand in the webinar controls at the bottom of the screen. By telephone, you may raise your hand by dialing *9. Please do not utilize the raise hand function until the start of the agenda item about which you desire to comment. We will take comments from in-person attendees first, followed by Zoom participants. The Zoom moderator will call on individuals who have raised their hand. The chairman may modify these procedures as needed to conduct an orderly and efficient meeting. All public speakers will be limited to 3 minutes unless the chair designates a different time period in order to accommodate all the speakers. When your name is called by the moderator, your microphone will be unmuted. Please state your name and address for the record, followed by your comments. If you share concerns, comments, or points made by others, please refrain from repeating those comments and instead note for the record that you agree with the previous individual's comments. There will be a 10 seconds remaining warning sound. Planning commissioners and presenters, please state your name every time you begin to speak so that the comments can be transcribed for the record. Please also make sure to speak clearly into your microphones. This is a public meeting. We are presenting live and recording the meeting. Thank you.
Don't know if I did this or not, but I'm Fred Starrett, Vice Chair. Are we ready now for any public comment? If there is any.
We do not have anybody in person to provide public comment, and we do not have any hands raised.
Right. I guess next item on the agenda is disclosure of conflict of interest and ex parte communications by members. I have a question on this. I have been contacted by folks on a Good Faith Network. I don't know if any of you have heard of that or not. It's trying to get grassroots support for 3 priorities. One is affordable housing in the Johnson County area. The other is mental health crisis care. And that would be a stabilization center. The hope is 26 beds. I understand that there's money available to the county, but I don't know that for a fact. That's what I've been told by folks that have approached me. And that they would like to see that money utilized for that purpose. That's their number one priority, is the crisis stabilization and affordable housing. I think that's probably been on your agenda before, I would imagine. And then ending homelessness, which is like a long-term goal. So I don't know if that's a conflict or not. So I just throw it out there. Who do we turn to for?
Okay, all right, yeah, all right, sorry. So that information you shared were items related to Board of County Commissioners agenda items. There's been nothing on the Planning Commission agendas regarding those subjects. So I don't think it's anything that you have to disclose as part of this group, but I'll ask our legal staff, if Mr. Ford, if he has any suggestions for that information.
Thank you, Bob Ford, Johnson County Legal Department. Now, the conflict of interest situation would come up if you actually had something relating to those items before you that you had to decide. It would not probably be unusual that you had been contacted by outside interested parties. We would recommend that you not discuss with individuals matters that you know or think are going to come before the Planning Commission, but sometimes it's unavoidable. All we ask is that you simply alert the rest of the board, as you have done, of those situations when they arise. But what's happened here is there's no items like that on the agenda, so it's not a conflict certainly tonight.
I guess my next question then would be about me joining that group. They're asking people to sign up, and I'm wondering if that's permissible or if it's better to not, or what.
It's certainly permissible.
Okay.
If matters then that will touch on that group come before the board, you would be required to recuse yourself.
Fair enough. Great. Thank you. Turn it over to the chair.
Could I let the record reflect that Lindsay Grisey has joined us at 5:56? Thank you.
Yes, sorry for my absence. I think that it's been so long since it's rained in Kansas City that maybe people forget how to drive. Thank you for your patience.
Chair Sean Penley, Planning Staff, just to let you know where we left off, we went through open public comments, and I think we were just starting disclosure of conflicts of interest. So that's where we are at this point in the agenda.
Was there any additional, Lindsay Grisey here, or are there any additional ex parte communications or conflicts of interest? Hearing none, I think we should move over to the approval of the meeting minutes from the last meeting. Has everybody had a chance to review, and does anybody have any corrections that they'd like to make for the record?
I make a motion. Brad Miller, I make a motion to approve the minutes.
Kelly Rast, second.
Perfect. Would Sean Penley, would you want to move on to the new Century Air Center Executive Airport Land Use Compatibility Plan Update Study Session?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Sean Penley, County Planning.
Mr. Chair or Mrs. Chair, sorry, do we need to have an actual vote on the minutes? Because I need to abstain because I was not present for that meeting. So
Yeah, that's appropriate. We could do a
Yeah.
vote on that.
Oh, okay. I apologize. So we had a second by Commissioner Rast. Can I get a vote for all in favor of approving the minutes?
I can go ahead and take roll.
Sure.
Gregory Wolf.
abstain.
Thank you. Michael David Paredes.
Perderis, aye.
Can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Kelly Rast.
Aye.
Brad Miller.
Aye.
Lindsay Grisey.
Aye.
Frederick Sturrett.
Aye.
Stephen Magnick.
McGank.
Gank. I'm gonna get it eventually. Timothy Orick. And is absent. Leslie Hind,
Aye.
Craig Connell,
Aye.
Thank you again, Sean Penley, planning staff. As mentioned, this update for the New Century Air Center and executive airport compatibility plans is something that we've talked about before with the Planning Commission. We've presented updates. This is a process now that's going on about a year in the making for updates to our compatibility plans for both of the county airports. And we are working with a consultant, Kaufman Associates, who's a leading consulting group that works on land use compatibility plans and land use updates for airports nationwide. And they're actually located here in Johnson County. Their offices are headquartered in Overland Park. But this plan update is part of both compatibility airport plans are adopted as part of the rural comprehensive plan. So these updates to the plans will need to be recommended for review and approval by the Planning Commission and the Airport Commission. And then the Board of County Commissioners will adopt those plan updates as part of our rural comprehensive plan. We've, as part of this process, we have, as I mentioned, we've been working on this for about a year. And we have held, we initially started with a planning advisory committee, which had representatives of the Planning Commission, Airport Commission, Board of County Commissioners, and all of the respective cities that work within properties within 1 mile of either airport. So that's City of Olathe, City of Overland Park, and City of Gardner. We held 4 advisory committee meetings with that group. They reviewed the draft plans in different iterations, provided comments and input. In addition, we held 8 public workshop meetings for both airports, 4 for each airport, 4 at New Century, 4 at Executive Airport, where we received comments and questions from the public. Public joined all of those meetings, and they're well attended. And then we met with all of the individual city staffs to go over the draft plans and get comments from the cities. They had a lot of information and input. And then finally, we had 2 developer stakeholder meetings with different developer interest groups around both airports. We, as you know, these applications that we are reviewing, it's pursuant to our the state statutes 3-307E, which requires any planning and zoning application within 1 mile of either airport has to be approved by the county for airport compatibility. So obviously the developers and those interested parties in developing properties near the airport have a lot of interest in these updates. So those 2 meetings were very well attended. They had a lot of questions and we got a lot of good input from them as well. So that was kind of the planning process of what we've done today. Most recently, we had a study session with the Airport Commission on October 4th. So they reviewed this information. And what we're going to show now, Diane Wickland is going to go through the draft overview of these updates to the compatibility plans. And you'll essentially see the same presentation that we gave to the Airport Commission. And then we'll try to answer any questions, obtain any comments. And then the next steps going forward then will be to schedule a public hearing with the Planning Commission. We are also going to have a public hearing at the Airport Commission. And then following those public hearings, we'll schedule these for final adoption with the BOCC. We expect probably early 2024. So with that, I'll turn it over to Diane to go through the draft plan update.
Thank you, Diane Wickland, Planning Department. And so I'm just going to kind of continue on with the presentation from Sean's remarks. And so this flow chart is just kind of showing the study process that Sean just talked about, starting in, October of 2022, working through those PAC meetings, and then the developer stakeholder meetings, and then the public information workshops. And so that study process is completed at this point. And now we're kind of preparing for that public hearing process now. And so we're kind of at the end of that flow chart on the right end there. And so just a reminder that a review of projects within 1 mile of the airport, that authority comes from the Kansas State Statute 3-307E, which says that changes in existing city zoning within 1 mile of the airport must be approved by the Board of County Commissioners to be valid and effective. The varying types of projects that are reviewed. And typically these are city applications that are coming to the county. Our preliminary development plans, final development plans, plats, zoning changes, conditional use permits and special use permits. So those are the types of city applications that that are reviewed by the Airport Commission and then ultimately goes to the Board of County Commissioners for final approval. And so in your packet, the Planning Commission did receive draft chapters of the updated airport compatibility plans for both airports. So we're doing this review for both airports simultaneously. And so tonight we're really just kind of presenting a summary or high level review of the key elements of the plans. And so each of those packets that you received, so chapter 1 is kind of the purpose and scope. Chapter 2 is just kind of a discussion of the airport environs and the surrounding area and what's occurring on the airport property. Chapter 3 is just kind of implementation and definitions that help support the plan. And then finally, and this is kind of the key component of the compatibility plans, are the compatibility policies and criteria that we would look to when we analyze those city applications when they come before the county. And then there's some appendices A, B, and C that talk about the noise contours and then just kind of supporting materials. And so what now I'm going to just kind of talk about what may change with the plans versus current and proposed, and then maybe what may stay the same. And so the potential changes right now to the plans. So these are the two maps of the airport, and they're kind of an aerial view. But so again, that yellow line is that 1 mile buffer area that is shown that where the authority is for us to review airport projects that are close to the airport. So currently in our plans, it's more of kind of looking at future land uses surrounding the airport and then looking at the future land uses that the city has proposed. And so that's kind of what we currently review when we're looking at these cases. So really the most significant change is this. So we're really shifting and changing from a future land use approach to looking for safety and compatibility to more of a compatibility analysis approach. And so the consultants developed kind of what they call these safety zone maps. And you can see those draft maps here for both airports. And so these safety zones are really very close into the airport property and really focusing in on safety and compatibility with these projects and airport operations, but really looking at the areas that are really critical. And so there's, I believe, 6 zones. And so the first zone is just the runway protection zone, and that's a highly protected area. Really nothing should be occurring in that area. The zone 2 is the inner approach and departure area. Zone 3 is the inner turning area for aircraft. And then zone 4 is the outer approach and departure areas. And then zone 5 are kind of the sideline areas. And then the blue area is zone 6. And that's kind of the area that used to be, or kind of the current plan called the airport interest area, and kind of outside of that area as well. And that zone is really kind of where you have the most flexibility for density and intensity with your project. And so it seems like we have gotten really good feedback from Airport Commission, the Planning Advisory Committee, which included city representatives, and the developers, that people really seem to like this approach because it's kind of more looking kind of scientifically and fact-based at where these safety zones really need to be. And so then what would happen is we would look at a project, look at that safety zone map, look at what zone it's in, and then we would refer to this compatibility criteria matrix. And as you can see, as I scroll down, it has each of those zones that I referred to. And then what, like, dwelling units per acre that would be allowed in each of those zones. And then kind of the maximum non-residential intensity that would be allowed. And there's, I don't have a slide of this, but there's in those, one of the appendix is showing some examples of calculations for that intensity and kind of how we would calculate that. And so then as you kind of go across the columns, so then in each zone, this matrix would then tell us kind of what the allowed uses are, allowed uses with conditions, and then kind of a section that's would be not recommended uses and density and intensity. And then that final column talks about other development conditions that would be required. Some of those you would be familiar with, which are kind of like an affidavit of interest and a plat note, that talks about your project or this land is within 1 mile of the airport property. And then also talks about noise impacts, and then talking about getting FAA approval for your height. So that matrix and the zone maps work together. A new section is just a definition section. These are just examples of definitions, but we've not had a definition kind of chapter before. So I think that'll be helpful when we're working with developers. This section is new. It talks about similar uses. So when you were looking at that matrix and we had specific uses listed out, this section can help staff with if somebody proposes a use that's not on that list or in that matrix, then this guides staff to kind of look at some other information sources or classification systems that can be used maybe from American Planning Association or other sources that can help us look at what would be kind of a similar use so that we can figure out which zone it would fit into. And then again, and this is something that is just kind of a notification and reminding the local governments and applicants that they should inform the airport management when a proposed project has been determined by the FAA that it will constitute a hazard or obstruction to air navigation, or if it has characteristics that may result in the creation of a hazard to air navigation. Some of the policies and concepts recommended to be carried forward in this new plan would be, obviously, we always look at the noise contours and noise impacts offsite from airport property. So the consultants did update those noise contours as part of this study process and their draft plan. And so what these maps are showing is that 65 dBA level doesn't go off airport property, and which is a positive thing because that really means that those higher noise levels are not off, not off airport property. And so, but it was important to update those noise contours. And as Sean said, these plans we've had around for quite a while, so it's kind of good to update those numbers. And then also continuing to work with the developers on looking at height. And so the FAA does look at height limits for buildings. And so there's actually a kind of I think a newer website that the airport staff guides the developers to. It's the FAA website, and you can put in your latitude and longitude and be able to, then that website tells you if you need to submit for review with the FAA for to see if the project has any navigation, any conflicts with that. And so we'll continue to work with the applicants on making sure that they do that FAA 7460 review. Other flight hazards that we will continue to look at are like glare or distracting lights with a proposed project that could be maybe mistaken for airport lights. Sources of dust or steam or smoke that could impair the visibility for the pilot. And then sources of any electrical interference that could occur with aircraft communications or navigation. And then kind of any proposed use, especially like landfills or maybe certain agricultural uses that could create an increased attraction of birds that can be also an interference with airport or aircraft navigation. So we'll continue to look at those hazards when we review projects. And then finally, this kind of airport related open spaces. So there is a section on that in the executive airport compatibility plan, but this just may include natural open space areas such as woodlands or floodplain, streamway corridors, and other open areas. And this would apply within like zones 2 and 4. Which kind of replace the primary flight corridors that you may have heard the staff or airport commission talk about. This section is also still under review by the legal counsel, our legal department, and airport commission staff, still kind of looking at that. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we will continue to have that notice of proximity to airports. And so that takes form in a couple of different ways. An affidavit that's filed, affidavit of interest, and a plat notation that just says that like a property within a residential subdivision is located within 1 mile of the airport, and that you may see aircraft operating above and hear that noise. And then certain restrictions that have been placed on that development is also in a form of an affidavit that would be recorded with the plat. And so those are kind of some of the main concepts that some are new, some will be carried over to this new plan. So the kind of planning process and next steps that we're looking at is that we will finalize these draft plans. And we're doing that by getting input from the cities and that planning advisory committee and the developers and the public, because we held those 8 public information workshops. So we'll finalize those draft plans. And then we're conducting these kind of work study sessions. So we did that first study session with the Airport Commission on October 4th. That went really well. A lot of good questions and feedback input from the airport commission with Kaufman, the consultant. And then tonight, of course, we're doing this study session with the planning commission. And then the next step would be that we would hold public hearings with the airport commission. And so tentative deadlines for that would be December 6th for the airport commission. And then hopefully December 19th with the planning commission here. After those public hearings are done, we'll follow up with a Board of County Commissioners study session similar to this. And then of course, final adoption by the Board of County Commissioners. So really tonight, the recommended action from staff would be to a motion to set a public hearing date with the Planning Commission. And we're proposing December 19th. And again, that is updating. So these two airport compatibility plans are part of our rural comprehensive plan. And so we would be updating the comprehensive plan and, changing out the current plans and updating those plans. And I think that's it for now. And Sean and I can take questions or comments from the Planning Commission. Thank you.
This is Kelly Rest. I do have a question. The last time we talked about this was prior to the whole board changing over. And I had brought to the attention about an email that was sent to various peoples on the Planning Commission and staff regarding the one building that is owned by Nanotechnologies. And it's one that, whether it's owned solely by a China company or subsidiary. But I think one of the other things that was brought to the attention was it's a new battery technology, or there's components of it that's a little worrisome as far as it being a hazard or, potentially volatile or whatever. So with you mentioning, the hazard section of this and safety, if this passes, will they go back and look at the existing buildings and what is out there now to determine whether they are considered appropriate and follows all the rules with this? Because I know that was a concern, but there's been no feedback from all of this.
Sean Penley, County Planning Staff, that particular use and the location you're referring to in C Nanotechnologies is actually located in New Century Commerce Center. That's on county property. So the interesting part of this review process, our compatibility plan review actually is all part of the any properties within 1 mile of airport property. The building you're referring to is actually on airport property because it's on county property. We conduct a review of airport compatibility even on airport properties.
Mhm.
It just doesn't go through the same process. So instead of going to the airport commission and the Board of County Commissioners, it goes to the respective zoning board, in this case, the West Zoning Board. We refer to the compatibility plans whenever we're reviewing any application. That building went through a review with the rezoning, preliminary, and final development plans. At the time of the rezoning and preliminary development plan, we didn't know who the users were for that building. That came after the fact. Regardless, the use is subject to review and approval of our county zoning regulations. And we do refer to the airport compatibility, and the zoning board considers that. That use was approved for warehousing and manufacturing. If there are any potential hazards with a use in a building that's on county property, it would be subject to all county regulations, including building codes, fire codes, and any other applicable federal or state codes. That use for C Nanotechnologies will be subject to county building codes, fire codes, and other regulations. That building permit for that tenant finish has not been approved yet, but it's going through the review. So as to the question of, is it subject to a separate review? It's not subject to a review before a planning commission or airport commission, but it is subject to building code requirements and has to meet all permit requirements. And the same would apply for any other use. there's industrial buildings surrounding the airport in the city of Olathe, as an example. They're going to be having an application considered, I believe, next month with the Airport Commission for use for a new industrial use in the I-35 Logistics Park or Scanel properties north of New Century. They'll be subject to the same review. Now, they're subject to the current compatibility plan because this plan has not yet been adopted, but any use that comes before the boards will have to meet the respective compatibility plan. So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, Kelly Rice, it does just, the only reason I brought it up because there was so much confusion around it before, and there seemed to be a lot of confusion or not a lot of information about it that citizens were wanting to know. But I guess the thing too is if it's a brand new, obviously building codes, fire codes, all that kind of stuff, that's pretty standard. But when you're talking like would there actually be professionals there that would understand this kind of new technology enough to know what was actually going on in the building, to know what the hazards might be? Are there people like that would be involved more so than just outside your basic building standard people, to have that good understanding of what's being actually done? I think that's the concern.
It's Sean Penley again. I don't know if I can speak to the other professionals that would review, other than our building official and our fire inspector would have to sign off and approve of any tenant finished building permit. There may be also, the users may have to follow certain regulations that might be outside of our requirements, but our building official and our fire inspector would have to approve that use and make sure that it does meet all life safety codes.
Okay, thank you.
So it's Leslie Hind. I have a question. Have you guys looked at as this area grows and more construction goes on, a sedimentation pond or some kind of building, all the flow goes to Gardner Lake. And so it's always concerning when you have these industrial buildings going up and we have a lot of wildlife and stuff out there. Have they looked at some kind of holding pond or something to filter stuff out before it goes on down to the lake?
Yeah, I don't know if you have something. Sean Penley,
Mhm.
planning staff. So are you referring to in general in the area around New Century,
Mhm.
all development? Are they considering a regional detention because of development in that area?
I guess my main concern is the industrial part, before getting filtered out before it actually hits the lake.
So the respective jurisdictions would review those kinds of requirements. So as an example, for a development in the either the I-35 Logistics Park, let's say, they're going to be building stormwater detention basins as part of their development. Those are required to meet the city's stormwater management requirements. They have to meet the city's stormwater requirements. The only thing that we would review in terms of airport compatibility would be wildlife mitigation. So there's I don't remember if Diane covered this in the presentation we had here, but there are policies and recommendations for wildlife mitigation because, of course, the airport is very concerned about potential hazards with bird strikes and congregations of wildlife. So that's how we address those kinds of things with stormwater detention. But the cities would address actual stormwater management for their respective development, if that answers the question.
Thanks.
Yes, sir.
I'm a little late to this, so I guess I'm a little confused. I looked at the draft and I'm assuming that some of that predated and there are changes, but I couldn't really tell what changes we would be looking at. I think these are more specific applications for specific cases. But this is a plan that we're supposed to have some input on, as I understand it. Is that correct?
That's
I'm sorry, this is Fred Sterrett. Keep forgetting that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, there were some of the things that I mentioned that were kind of new concepts to these updates. So, we didn't really have a red line version because this new draft is considerably different than the current plan. not that the current plan is not good. It's just kind of very different, especially with this new approach of looking at these safety zones versus looking at that future land use compatibility. So, if you're looking kind of for a red line version, we don't really have that because it is very different. But you do, you do have the chapter. So, but that safety zone map, that change in how we're approaching it is a very significant change. I don't know if that helps or not, but really it's just kind of having to look through those kind of draft chapters.
And so I think we maybe had, or someplace we have the one that predates these proposals, correct? And then we're going to have to dig out what the changes are. Is that what you're telling me?
So we have the current plans, which are, we did not, print those out and include them. Sean, maybe we can do that, or we can send out links, maybe to Planning Commission if you kind of want to kind of look at the current versus proposed, if that would help.
I guess what I'm wondering is what we are not taking up consideration in this project of applications for either waivers or whatever. We're trying to come up with a policy. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay.
So these two compatibility plans are what staff review and use when city applications come to the Airport Commission and the BOCC for approval. So these plans are just that. They're the review mechanism for when the Airport Commission looks at very specific projects. But the Planning Commission here would not be doing that review of specific city applications.
Well, I guess at some point, will we receive a bullet point, consider this, and there'll be discussion on that and whether that's a good idea or not. I mean, is that, I guess I'm asking, how does this work as we move toward December 19th, when apparently we're going to be asked to consider this new plan, if I understand correctly?
Yes, Sean Penley, planning staff. I would say, yeah, this isn't kind of an unusual. It's the first time we've updated these plans. So the plans date back to the 1990s. So as Diane mentioned, there are land use policies that are adopted as part of our rural comprehensive plan. So we don't have a good reference to talk to, but this is not a typical update to our zoning regulations or the comprehensive plan. These are a very specific appendix or appendices in the comprehensive plan. So you're just merely updating those existing plans, and we're replacing them essentially. I know this was asked in a process. Are we updating the plans? We're replacing these plans. So there's enough changes here, and they're so outdated now. We just need to replace them. So we're replacing the existing plans. We can provide a copy of the existing plans for reference to the Planning Commission, so you have it. But just so you know, as an example, at the Airport Commission in their study session, they're very familiar with it because they do review the actual applications that come before them in terms of making a recommendation on a specific land use. They don't get into much of the compatibility plan, so they're kind of not real familiar with the compatibility plan themselves, but they're very familiar with the actual applications that come before them in terms of zoning approval, actual plans. But they had a lot of similar, questions on, well, what is in the current compatibility plans in terms of land use and what is in it for recommended uses. Staff provides them that. So we could certainly provide you, it may be helpful for you if we could provide you the existing compatibility plans just to show you what those existing plans are. And you'll see how this plan keeps some of those policies like Diane mentioned and introduces new policies. The one big change I think that would be most helpful for you to understand, think of it in terms of land use. Our compatibility plans, one of the current things that we're doing in the existing plans is we use a future land use map. That's a problem because all of the cities have their own land use plans, and they always ask us, well, why is your airport land use plan saying it's recommended for open space and ours say industrial, which one governs? Well, there's conflicts there. So we're going to, just as an example, to try to eliminate that argument or that confusion, we're going to do away with the land use plan as part of this compatibility update. And we're going to introduce the safety compatibility plans or the safety zones and the compatibility criteria. That's one big element you might want to look at carefully. So in your draft plans, I would just encourage you to look at those chapters dealing with land use, the safety zone maps and the compatibility criteria. I think they're the chapter 4 in each of those plans. That will really give you a basis for understanding the whole concept of land use. And then, but I think we could also provide the planning commission with the current plans just as a reference, see if that helps answer your questions. Then I think really the only other thing we'd be asking for the planning commission now is if you have any comments or input, you could provide that to staff at the public hearing, or any other questions or input tonight. We'd welcome that.
This is Chairman Grisay. So one thing that I found helpful that I think was a little unclear to me when I first came onto the planning commission is that oftentimes the staff will give us proposed, regulations, proposed updates. But we can ask, okay, what was the basis? Like I have certain questions. For example, Diane, when you were talking about the max non-residential intensity, and there were numbers like 70 persons. How did we come up with 70? Why not 60? Why not 80? And then we can kind of go through and ask the basis of some of these questions. And then we can actually do a vote if we have, a strong feeling as a planning commission to change certain things depending on what we hear from the public, what we hear from staff, and our own experiences. And so that's kind of where I've seen a lot of our input or our voice comes on, the staff makes proposals. We can ask questions for what caused them to go a certain way or another, and then discussion amongst ourselves, and then do a vote, if that helps.
Everything helps.
Sorry for the interruption, but I may just add quickly. So just to kind of talk to you about your specific comment. So the airport consultants, obviously came out with those numbers and this safety zone map and the matrix. But they did get guidance from two sources. One is the FAA has a specific, they call it a circular, but it's a specific circular that deals with future land use compatibility around airports. So that's kind of one source of where they kind of looked at numbers from that. The second source is California has a kind of a airport planning handbook and does a lot of airport land use planning. And so that was kind of the second source I think that they looked at. So I just wanted to share that. So there is some sources and background information from the FAA and in particular California, where they kind of looked at that as a guide for those kind of numbers and matrix.
Chairman Grisay, the other question I had is when you were giving a summary of the noise modeling, was that based on actual measurement at the property line, or was that based on noise modeling software? Just curious.
Sean Penn, that's a good question. Yes, the consultant did do actual sound measurements at the airport and surrounding properties. This will be good. Kaufman Associates will be at the public hearing and they can answer some specific questions like this. They did do detailed measurements for the noise modeling for different aircraft around both airports. It's a very extensive process and they're updated. And that, it's a big deal, I guess, with, we didn't understand this going into this process either, but there's definitely different sounds from different types of aircraft, and they have to account for those different types of aircraft at both airports and get the actual sound measurements. But that is all part of this update for both airports. They did have very detailed sound measurements.
But my last question, Chairman Grisay, would be first of all, great presentation, Diane. And I appreciate all of the public outreach that the planning staff and others have done with the public. What have been the feedback that you've heard from the public about their concerns as with regard to updating the airport type regulations?
I think the feedback has been pretty positive. I think in general, so we held those 8 public information sessions, and they were held at both airports. Had pretty good turnout from kind of neighboring people, neighboring subdivisions. Of course, noise is always just going to be an issue when you live by the airport. Not a lot of control over that, but looking to the future on trying to look at more compatibility, and that density will help with that. But I think in general, it seemed like very good, positive feedback. I think everyone feels like this approach with the safety zones and that matrix is more logical. It's going to be easier to implement and analyze. And then we're not kind of in conflict with the cities. And so I think in general, the public seemed to be pretty supportive of it. I don't know, Sean, if.
Yeah, this is Sean Penley. I would say one other common theme I heard at the public workshops was a little bit of confusion, or maybe not knowing exactly what the updates were for. Initially, most people are assuming these updates are regarding the master plans for the airports. In other words, what is the airport doing as far as development on their property? So a lot of questions out at New Century. What kind of development is happening on the New Century Commerce Center? And at Executive Airport, where's the next hangar going to be? This is not a master plan for the airports themselves. This is a compatibility plan, land use planning for the properties outside of the airport. That was a big confusion, something we had to make sure we were making clear. So some property owners were glad to understand what the update was. And then, as Diane mentioned, a lot of concern about noise. They wanted to know, how is the noise changing? What is it affecting any properties? And then just, what are your changes going forward? How are you going to be reviewing these plans? Like Diane said, I think they generally were well received. We didn't have any real concern. They did also mention, a couple of property owners I know came up to me and told me at New Century that they were aware of our affidavit requirements for the location within close proximity to the airport, because they had to sign one as part of their closing on their property, or they received one. So they were aware of these requirements that come out of this, and they didn't know why. I didn't know why I had this document. Now I know why. It was because of the airport review process. So I think it was well received. And the developers very interesting too. Their stakeholder meetings were from a different approach. They wanted to know, how are you going to affect my property that I want to develop that's right outside the airport? So they had really good questions, and we received all of those comments as part of this update. So it went well for all of our meetings.
This is Commissioner Rask. This might help. I asked the same question because I was sort of trying to figure out, I don't know if this will help you, and hopefully the person told me the right answer before I share. But it's basically, it's a framework. Since more development is going out towards these airports, it's kind of getting ahead of it to kind of lay out what's acceptable, what's not acceptable for either people who might move out there to know what's going to be around them, or for developers. Like, if somebody comes in there and says they want to build a daycare right there, they're going to be like, you're going to be up against, climbing a hill trying to get that passed, because it's in our policy or the planning that that's not an acceptable. So it's kind of get ahead. Is that correct? Kind of get ahead, so people kind of know what the plan is for those areas.
Yeah.
Was what I was told.
Yeah, Sean Penn, I would agree that I think the number one stakeholders for these plans are the development community that has any plans to develop, or property owners within a mile of either airport. They want to know, what are these plans recommending for my future land use?
Vice Chair Starrett. So basically, you're being more specific than you were in the 90s plan. Is that kind of what's?
Sean Penn, I would say in some ways, yes, much more specific, but also not dealing with a future land use, but rather a safety zone and compatibility criteria. Yeah, it's much more specific in that regard. Yeah.
Okay.
Craig Connell, I have a couple, 3 questions here. So I guess before we consider these, what I consider long-term plans for these airports, has the county ever looked at consolidation of the airports? I've always wondered why we had 2 airports with less than 10 miles apart in Johnson County. And when I think of the new safety approach, the noise emphasis, I don't understand why executive still exists, frankly. I've flown out of both airports personally, and you know, New Century is so much nicer and better than executive. But has anybody ever, as a county, ever studied that? And I don't know which group would study that. It would be the Airport Commission, the Board of County Commissioners, Planning Department. I don't know who would do that, but I'd like to know more about that before we would advance, long-term plans on keeping 2 airports.
Sean Penley, I would say to that question specifically, we would definitely want the Airport Commission, probably the executive director of the Airport Commission, Brian Johnson, probably would be best to answer that question, or possibly Larry Pete, deputy director. They definitely would give you real good reasons for why they have 2 separate airports, and then why their plans are to keep them the way they are. I couldn't answer that question. I don't know if Diane has a better answer, but definitely the Airport Commission staff will be available at the public hearing and could answer that question better. But as I mentioned, they do have their own respective master plans. Those master plans are actually recommended for approval by the Airport Commission and then approved by the Board of County Commissioners. So they never go through our review. Planning staff and Planning Commission never sees their master plans for development. They go through a different process. So I couldn't answer those specific questions on their operations and their future use.
And those master plans are also approved by FAA, and that's kind of what governs the airport operations as well. But good question, and we can maybe have airport staff follow up with that at the public hearing and try to answer that for you.
All right, thank you.
This is Brad Miller. Great presentation, Diane. Question for you on these, when we get these, like in the executive airport enviro. So reading through it, you've got a table chart in there and an exhibit. So I couldn't find, and I may not be smart enough, I couldn't find any of the exhibits to refer back to in my packet. All it has is tables. So I don't know if we don't look at those, if we didn't get them. I didn't get any exhibits
Okay.
in my packet.
The appendices, you mean, or?
That's correct. I believe all those exhibits that you're referring to are not as part of the packet that went out, but it will be a part of the draft plans that are presented at the public hearing.
Okay, so when reading these, then, so when we review these documents, then I guess my question would be then, do we review these documents?
Yes,
is that-
so you should have in that packet, you should have draft chapters 1 through 4, and then appendices A, B, and C. You should have that for both airports. I don't have a copy up here in front of me, but I was thinking that the exhibits were something more that were referred to and embedded in each chapter. But I don't have it in front of me.
I have the appendix A, B, and C. I'm sorry if I missed, which section specifically were you asking about?
Well, when I was reading the executive airport environs, so when I got to look at exhibit, because you have your tables in there, and then I went to look at exhibit 2E. So I went to find 2E, and I don't know where 2E is, and then I got to one that was 2H, and I couldn't, and that was on the future land of use designation. And they're identified on exhibit 2H, and I couldn't find 2H. So I was wondering what.
Is there a page number on that section you were referring to?
No. That would be 2.3.3.
This is Chairman Gusey, but the exhibits are kind of mentioned throughout this whole, in 2.1, exhibit
Bunch of them.
2A is mentioned throughout.
On the main doc.
Can you say that section again? Sorry.
The one, well, even on the first page there.
Oh.
You know, exhibit 2B.
Talking about, right here, it says 2H.
Mhm.
And I don't believe there is a
There's
2H
2H.
table for exhibits. You got enough table exhibits.
The exhibits are also mentioned in, I think, other chapters, or at least I'm looking at. And in the appendices themselves.
I believe one, just as an example on that first example you're asking about, exhibit 2B, they may not be referred to correctly in the draft plans, but I think what that's referring to is the actual map. It may not be called out as exhibit 2B on the map, but if you look then at that exhibit 2B is in chapter 4. That's the map. That's the or the safety map. So it'd be on page. I think what that's referring to is on chapter 4, it's actually exhibit 4A. I think what we have moved these around a little bit. I think they may have some of these exhibits may have started in chapter 2 and they've been moved to chapter 4. I think that's correct. This would be a good example where our consultants would be helpful if we had them here. Like I said, they'll be here at the public hearing. But some of these exhibits are referring to different maps or illustrations in the actual draft plan.
And that they could maybe be in different chapters, but not the chapter, where it's referring to. So, maybe for sake of time, I can try to take a look at that and, if we can maybe send out another email and, to clarify that, maybe Sean. if we
Well,
can do
what
that.
I would suggest, we're, as Diane mentioned, is through this process, staff is even still going through these draft plans and we're still making edits. And we're working with Kaufman Associates. These are very draft and very preliminary. We are tightening up some of the specific references and tables and maps. We will note that we need to make sure that these are referencing the correct exhibits and refer to where the exhibits are located. Maybe that will be helpful. See page 4.2, 4-2. I think that maybe would be helpful to answer your question.
Yeah, it'd be helpful. This is Brad Miller. It'd be helpful, very helpful as you go through these. To be able to see the exhibits that they refer to.
Sure.
Really, Ross, maybe just have like a chapter that has all the tables and exhibits. So as you're reading through it, you can have the other on the side and flip to the
Mhm.
exact one so that they're all together.
It's a good idea.
Make it easy.
Yep.
This is Greg Wolf. So what you're asking for is a motion to set a public hearing.
At this time, I think what staff needs is just to set a public hearing date. Staff have moved forward then. Once the planning commission recommends that, we'll set the public hearing and we'll send out the notice.
So this is Greg Wolf. I'll make that motion subject to correcting the exhibit table issue.
Kelly Ross, second.
All right, so the New Century Airport and Executive Airport Land Use Compatibility Plan update study sessions and the public hearing are set for December 19th. Should we have a vote?
Yes,
Roll
please.
call.
Greg Wolf,
Aye.
Michael David Perderis,
Aye.
and he's showing us a thumbs up. You can't see that. I could fix this sound, but we'll wait. Okay, 3, Kelly Rast.
Aye.
Brad Miller,
Yes.
Lindsay Grisay,
Yes.
Frederick Starrett,
Perfect. Aye.
Stephen Magnick?
McGank.
McGank.
It's okay. Aye.
Timothy Oric, he's not here. 9, Leslie Hind,
Aye.
Craig Connell,
Aye.
and Andrew Logan.
Aye.
And that is 10? Because we have one missing. Yes, 10 in favor.
Lindsay Grisay here. So let's move on to a discussion of the new lot of record date. Karen, I think you're probably wanting to discuss and give us a brief summary to refresh our recollection of the issue and what the ask is.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. So last time we met, staff brought to you an issue that that both staff and some landowners have been having with our current regulations. So right now, the subdivision regulations apply to lots starting in 1982. So anything before 1982 is exempt from our zoning and subdivision regulations. Starting in 1982, on a certain date, we consider that to be a lot of record. And then moving forward from 1982, that lot of record gets one administrative tract split if all the other things meet the zoning regulations. In other words, there's adequate area for both lots, adequate frontage, and that type of thing. That's completely administratively approved. And then further subdivisions after that require platting. And so anytime we get a call when planning staff answers the phone and somebody asks about their land and do I have to plat? Can I administratively split it? Am I eligible for a building permit? We have to research all the way back to 1982 and determine exactly where this parcel is. So staff is recommending that we change that lot of record date to January 1st, 2007. Originally, I had suggested March of 2006, but we just kind of rounded it up to January 1st, just because it's easier to remember. And then the reason for this is in 2007, the Register of Deeds are actively indexing the parcels with both the tax ID number and the address. And we can easily track the divisions starting in 2007. The Register of Deeds actually started tracking that and indexing in 2004. But we wanted to give them a little bit of a buffer to make sure that everything was going smoothly and that everything is accurate. So we brought up this issue. We requested to draft zoning regulations to change this lot of record date. Planning Commission agreed, and here I am today, and I do have those draft regulations, and I'll go through them. I'll summarize them, and then after I'm done, I'll answer any questions. And my staff's suggestion is that we set a public hearing for our next meeting date, which would be November 28th. So ultimately that's the recommendation for this evening. So in your packet, the first draft article is Article 25. That's the start of our subdivision regulations. And so this sets out exactly when you have to plat or also when you are able to do an administrative lot split. So we reworked section 3. It was very wordy, very hard to understand, and we're not changing anything, but the new section 3 that we're suggesting basically says that unless there's an exemption that's set out in the next section, land in unincorporated Johnson County needs to be platted if you divide it. And that plat has to be filed with the Register of Deeds. That's this very first sentence. And then the next paragraph here says, and this is not a change, that no building permit shall be issued for construction on any land that has not been subdivided in compliance with these regulations. So the result of improperly dividing your land is that you cannot receive a building permit for anything. So then what we did, this is a change. At the end of this sentence, we said, with the exception that you can get a building permit for basic maintenance, because if somebody has a problem with their land, and you can own a house, you can have 10 acres that has been created in conformance with the regulations. You can build a house, but then you can divide that piece of property into 2 acres and the house, and then 8 acres of vacant land, and you can sell that. And so then both of those parcels are out of conformance. Neither parcels are eligible for building permits, but we do want existing structures and homes to be able to be maintained. So we added that small change. So that's what section 3 sets out. It sets out that you have to plat except for the exemptions set forth in section 4. So A talks about a lot line adjustment. I'm not going to read it. The way that's set forth is pretty long-winded, but basically it says if you have an unplatted piece of land, and it's adjacent to another piece of land, you can move that shared property line as long as you comply with all of the other requirements of the regulations, meaning that it has enough area, enough frontage, and any structures maintain the proper setback, that type of thing. B talks about land for railroad. C, this is the essence of what we're suggesting to do. C says the division of a tract or lot of record prior to January 1st, 2007. So this is in the exemption section. So we're saying that those divisions prior to 2007 are exempt from having to plat, basically. And then cemetery plats are exempt. Then the next several additions that we have, these just reflect the way we administer the regulations, their policies that we have. And so we thought we would set those forth in the regulations. So E is it references the approved lot split. And that's in Article 29. That'll be the next section article we talk about. F is a division approved with a special permit. Some of you might not have heard about the special permits. They're basically a conditional use permit, except they apply to infrastructure and publicly owned projects. And the reason we pulled those types of things away from this conditional use permit is we think it's in the public interest not to require a term for these types of things. And we don't already the regulations don't apply, the subdivision regulations to this type of project, to public infrastructure. G, basically public right-of-way dedication. This is things like right-of-way dedication for like a bridge project, extra land for like a box culvert, that type of thing. H is public parkland. We've had several times where, like for instance, Johnson County Parks and Rec has been given parkland from people, and we don't want to require a plat for that to be able to give land to the park. And then the last one is annexations. When land in unincorporated Johnson County is adjacent to a city, we have absolutely no control over those annexations. So we don't feel like we should apply the subdivision regulations to that situation. So I'll take, before I move on, since we're right here, I'll take any questions that you have over any of these.
Chairman Grisay, quick question on section 3 where it talks about ordinary maintenance.
Yes.
I was curious if there would be a benefit of adding some more specific language on maintenance to the unimproved property. So it's clear that it's supposed to be maintenance to the subject property and not some other land use that may be an exception.
So like maintenance of existing structures, is that would be, or are you thinking about something else?
So the question, or maybe it was my lack of understanding. My sense was that if this section was being used, then the applicant couldn't receive a new building permit. So I was just trying to make sure there wasn't clarity on that there wasn't an exception that maintenance and repairs wouldn't extend to kind of furthering it's what's currently there. It's not building a new thing for maintenance, a new thing for repairs.
So only maintenance and a repair to what's there.
Correct.
Yes, yeah, that's a good idea. I will put that.
Was there any other questions from the commissioners?
Yeah, Craig Connell. So I'm confused about what ordinary maintenance is, how that's defined. If I paint my house,
So-
does that require a building permit?
I talked with our head of the building codes, and we checked and made sure that that's defined, and
Okay.
it's defined in building codes. So that our building official will take care of any of those determinations on what this would apply to.
And Sean Penley, I would also note that these draft changes would not apply to actually requiring building permits, but rather they're listing as exceptions to when you wouldn't need a plat because of work you're doing as part of a permit. So if that makes sense. So any work that anybody's doing, they've got to get a permit when required. But you wouldn't have to have a plat approved if you're coming in to get a building permit, if your lot is currently considered not legal record, if that makes sense.
So for example, if you, let's say there's a parcel, a 2-acre parcel, it should have 10 acres. It's not in conformance with the zoning regulations. There's a house on it and there's a huge hailstorm and it breaks all the windows, and the windows need to be replaced. So we would not require them to plat and rezone and remedy the situation before we would grant them a building permit for the windows. We would just let them maintain their property.
So they still have to get a permit. They just don't have to plat the property. That's what we're talking about with these regulations is it's an additional, it's a requirement currently. If somebody has a lot that's not legal record, they'd have to also plat before they get a building permit. But here, if we're saying for these types of ordinary repairs or maintenance, you wouldn't need to plat, just get your permit.
Greg Connell, I'm just surprised you would need a building permit to put new windows in that's been damaged in a storm. That seems like unreasonable requirement.
I just made that up. I think you need a building permit.
Okay,
for
all right,
windows.
okay, good. I'm glad you did.
I think it's a better chance you would get a roof permit. I
Yeah,
don't know, an example specifically on, in Windows, that might be a question for our building official, but an example would definitely be a roof permit. Roof permits are definitely required. And if you had a contractor doing a roof replacement, they got to get a permit.
I know you at least need a building permit for window replacement on commercial properties. And so that's why I pulled that out of the air, because I'm currently working on something like that. So,
So, Miss Karen, is one of the questions, I guess, the thing that we're being asked to weigh in doing this is by not offering that ordinary maintenance exception, we're kind of incentivizing people who haven't properly platted to either make the choice to either plat or allow their properties to go into disrepair.
yeah,
And-
that's the idea.
And so the question is, do we want to create an incentive to properly plat? Or is it outweighed by the kind of damage to the public of kind of improper maintenance?
Yes.
Okay.
All right, thank you. So now I'll move on to the next article. We mentioned lot splits. You do not have to plat if you are eligible for an administrative lot split. So starting with, currently in 1982, each parcel, if they have enough land and other requirements, are eligible for one administrative lot split. So the purpose of this is to move that lot of record date up to from 1982 to 2007. So this is a rewriting of the first paragraph, saying that if the lot existed on January 1st, 2007, not more than 2 lots or tracts without having to comply with platting requirements described in Article 4 through 25 through 31 of these regs. So basically, starting in 2007, you can have one administrative tract split. And so we would only have to research it back to 2007 to determine if a parcel is eligible for this tract split. And then if you look at the first sentence of Section 2, this is not related to the lot of records, but I just am found this has been a little bit problematic, this requirement. I'll read it to you. After providing at least 5 days written notice of each lot split application to the members of the zoning board for the area in which the property in question is located, the zoning administrator is authorized to approve or deny the lot split applications in accordance with these requirements. So this is a completely administrative application. But we do have to send it under these regulations to the zoning board for their comment if they have any comments. But there's really, if it meets all of the requirements, if the 2 parcels meet everything that the underlying zoning regulation requires, and if it hasn't been divided since in this right now 1982, we have to approve it. So it extends the time that it takes for somebody to get a lot split approved, and this has been problematic for some people. There a lot of times, people can wait and it's fine, but some people, they had a closing date and they didn't understand that the parcel had to be divided before they could sell it, and so it causes unneeded weight for the people who are trying to sell their land. And also it does notify the zoning board, but it kind of implies that there's more power than just, being notified of it. So there's probably better ways of notifying the zoning board that this split has occurred. So we're proposing to remove that requirement with this amendment, since we're here and looking at Article 29. And
Question, Craig Connell here.
mhm.
So will these proposed changes be presented to the zoning boards also?
That's a good, we could,
So Sean Penley, I will say for our zoning boards, we do give them an update at every zoning board meeting. We give them an update on board actions, board reports for both the planning commission and the zoning board, the BOCC. We can certainly give them an update on this matter and at both the draft form and the public hearing. I will say, just as a comparison, an example here, this is, I feel it's kind of an outdated requirement, this requirement to go to a zoning board for a lot split, because as an example, in the cities, they just approve this administratively. This never even goes to their planning commission or city council. But yeah, certainly it's a good point. We would give an update to the zoning boards about this after, because we always give them an update on planning commission actions and board of county commission actions.
Yeah, Craig Connell here. So being on the West zoning board, I get these notices with 5-day requirements to get comment back if you get any. So, I think since it affects the boards, they should know about this change coming.
yeah, thank you for thinking of that. I got so focused on these changes, I didn't even think about.
I'm okay with it. It's just, I think
Yeah.
you should notify them at least.
Yeah, I think that's a good courtesy. And then the last article to look at is the Article 24 that addresses non-conforming lots and uses. So Section 2 talks about when we have legal non-conforming lots in the rural district. That is A right here. So so the rural district requires at least 10 acres. There's other things that are required, but it requires at least 10 acres. So it starts out in rural districts, tracts are a lot smaller than 10 acres, we're proposing to change it, which were lots of record on January 1st, 2007, may be used for single family residential purposes. So basically it's saying that we're suggesting to move that lot of record date to 2007. And then if there's an RUR lot that has less than 10 acres, you can get a building permit and build a home on it. And then Section B is similar. It's for the residential zoning districts. It says, and it's basically says that if you have a lot of record on January 1st, 2007, and if it's has a lot less than prescribed minimum lot area, width, or depth, you can build a home on that particular parcel too. So those are the two ways that we are proposing to change the regulations to accommodate that new lot of record. So those are the three articles we talked about when we apply the subdivision regulations in our Article 25. We talked about lot splits in Article 29 and deeming them legal non-conforming lots in Article 24. That's all there is on this subject, unless I have, if you have other questions.
Hearing none, do we have a motion from the commissioners to set this for public hearing on November 28th, 2003? 2023.
Greg Wolf here, so moved, Madam Chair.
Do we have a second?
Leslie Hind, I'll second it.
Can I get a roll call vote?
Yes, Commissioner. Gregory Wolf,
Aye.
Michael David Perderis,
Aye.
Kelly Rast.
Aye.
Brad Miller,
Aye.
Lindsay Grisay,
Aye.
Frederick Starrett,
Aye.
Stephen Magnick,
McGank. That's okay. Aye.
Leslie Hind,
Aye.
Craig Connell,
Aye.
Andrew Logan,
Aye.
and that would make 10 in favor.
All right, so let's move to the final, to the director's report, I believe.
Madam Chair, Sean Penley, planning staff. We did provide an updated memo in the packet regarding conditional use permit notification area requirements. Karen drafted this memo. We could give a quick update on that if that would help, and then I can mention the future agenda items.
Yeah, this is Lindsay Grisay. So the, just for the people who weren't here last, about 2 months ago. So this issue, I'm on the Board of Zoning Appeals. And one of the issues that came before, required an opinion and a finding by the Board of Zoning Appeals. But one of the issues that was in that finding was, an ask for the Planning Commission to consider whether there should be some adjustments made to public notice to get people more aware of projects in these rural areas as it relates to specific conditional use permit types, not just regular, but certain ones that may have sound or smell or lighting, some that would feel a little bit further away than the 1,000-foot mandatory notice provision. And so because I was sitting on the planning commission, I had asked Karen or the planning staff to kind of look into maybe just an early WAG to see if that would be something, because the Board of Zoning Appeals had asked for us to look into it. And that's what prompted this memo.
Thank you. So staff did look at it, and so it'd be good to just go over what is the current notice requirements, because staff is of the opinion that there's a lot of notice required already. The number one on the first page of the memo is that, as Chairman Grisay mentioned, the written notice to landowners within 1,000 feet. That's a statutory requirement that's required by state statute. Number two is published notice in the official county newspaper. Again, that's required by state statute. So number three is posting the subject property with signs. And so all of you have probably noticed those big yellow signs announcing public hearings. And then four is supplementary things that the county does. So prior to a meeting, the packet that's sent out, we post onto the website. And then also, it's not mentioned here, when people let us know that they want a copy of the packet, we used to, in the old days, just mail them. We either mailed the agenda or the entire packet if somebody signed up for it. But now we send them the links. So at the same time that you're getting the links to all of the agendas and staff reports and things, other people who have requested that information are getting it. And the idea is to be balanced with our notification, and the county, when we process these requirements, we want to be somewhat neutral and fair to all parties. we have a landowner and their team who's wanting to do a development, and then we have the surrounding community and landowners who may agree with the development or may not, you know. So the goal is to be fair and balanced to all sides on this. And we think that the state has a good system, you know, at the moment. So then we try to identify any particular issues associated with increasing that notification. But to emphasize, this is allowable. You know, if the Planning Commission wants to propose increasing it to 5,000 or whatever value, that is a possibility. But you know, planning staff recommends that we consider that pretty carefully. So one of the first issues that we think it'd be pretty ambiguous on a couple of things. So the first thing is that we wonder how that would affect the protest petition area. Would it be 1,000 feet? Would it be 5,000 feet? You know, anytime you have a notification area, that's telling the judge or the court that there's possible issues with this. You know, so would this increase the protest petition? Are these people within 5,000 feet? Are they, you know, have they been tagged by the county as people who should have, you know, extra say in this matter? The second thing is similar is, would this new notification area increase those with standing for a lawsuit? Right now, the courts pretty much acknowledge the 1,000-foot notification area. If you're within that area, you probably have standing for a lawsuit. So, you know, and it doesn't matter if it's just a postcard notification or if it's certified mail. If you're reaching out to all of these extra people and we're saying, you might be concerned about this, you might be affected by this, you should come in and come to this public hearing, the courts might think that this gives them cause to have standing. And then that suddenly not only sometimes double, but quadruple, or, you know, the number of people who can sue the county, for one thing. And then the third thing is when we go through and we review the conditional use permit, one thing that we have to review is the character of the neighborhood. What is the character of the neighborhood, and how will this application interact with it? Well, you know, suddenly, you know, what is the neighborhood now? Is it kind of just the immediate area, or is it, are we required to look at this 5,000 feet buffer zone? So, you know, we don't know the answers to this. So, you know, we would just have to use our best idea about how we should handle this. And you know, if there's a party that wants to sue us, and, you know, find out if there's another approach, you know, then that might happen. It might not, but it might. So then the other thing that we kind of identified is some unintended consequences. So certain parties, they might be benefited, or they might have negative consequences. So we think that it would be difficult to find quorum sometimes, because if we're reaching out a mile from these projects, and if there's a zoning board member that lives in this radius and they've been notified, we've indicated that they very well could be affected by this project. So if they're affected by the project, then they should probably recuse themselves. So that could be one unintended consequence. Also, I have an example of this in the maps that are attached. If this is adjacent to the city, it reaches out pretty deeply into the city limits. So this could give a lot more voice to city inhabitants over a county zoning, conditional use permit matter. And then also we could have a lot larger public hearings on a routine basis. And we can look at some of the numbers on these maps that I made. And as I mentioned before, we think that maybe one of the consequences would be that it perhaps tips the balance, towards the surrounding neighbors and away from the landowner. So because of this, we don't recommend increasing the notification area to 5,000 feet. But one thing that we think would be a better way to get the surrounding community involved would be to require a public meeting and individual notice sent to those people within I said public neighborhood meeting with all of those people within the 1,000-foot notification area invited. So the neighborhood meeting before the public hearing to give people a chance to find out more about it and give people a chance to spread the word if they think that there's a problem. And kind of to show exactly what the effects would be, I created 4 maps. And I tried to choose areas that probably would be affected by this suggestion. So I looked at Edgerton Quarry. It's next to the city of Edgerton at 199th and Sunflower Road. They're on PEC and RUR zoning. And they would go from 39 people within their notification area to 762, I said people, but parcels within their notification area. And you'll notice that it basically would include almost all of the city of Edgerton, or at least their main portion of Edgerton. So I thought that was a pretty good example. And then here's the New Century Air Center. This is the Wausau property. Here is the city limits between Gardner and the New Century Air Center property, which is in unincorporated Johnson County. And so currently, a project would have to notify 213 parcels, but with this notification, it would have to notify almost 2,000 parcels. And I chose this because New Century Air Center has industrial zoning, and it is where most of our industrial projects come. And those are typically the types of projects that have a lot of impacts. Here is in Stillwell. Lindsay mentioned this parcel that went to the BZA. It's right here. So I chose this. I thought this was a pretty typical possible application in the area. It's next to retail business zoning and industrial zoning. It's 123 acres. So, and keep in mind, people have to post signs on their project. So there'd be a public hearing sign on 199th Street and Metcalf Avenue. So if you live in the area, you're probably going to know about this project. And so it goes from 90 people's parcels to 800 parcels. And then the last example, it's on the edge of the city of Olathe. And this would be a typical kind of I don't know, some kind of CUP for something. And it goes from notifying 65 parcels to 1,300 parcels.
Do any of the commissioners have questions about what the staff report is doing here?
Yeah, this is Commissioner Rast. I see all sides of this and I was wondering if we could maybe consider something in the middle. Because I kind of did the same thing since I live in Stillwell. There is quite a few things that are buzzing around my area. And if we just went out to like a quarter of a mile, it only involved 10 houses, but yet it impacts me greatly, as far as what is going on. So and I see some of your stuff, but I do have an issue with, we should never not do something because we're afraid of a lawsuit. That's a problem right there. Like, then something's wrong. And I'm a firm believer in as much transparency as possible. And I know you put the little signs out, but around Stillwell, those get knocked down fairly easy or difficult to read, or they're not always the most visible. I mean, you have to make a point, especially if it's along the side where there's a lot of growth and stuff. So I look at this a little bit different. I also don't feel like it's an advantage to the neighborhood versus the developer. I mean, I'm all for keeping everything as fair as possible, but the developer knows what he's doing. Citizens have to find out what he's doing. And that gets harder between emails or notices. So, and just my example is that I live off of 185th that comes off of Metcalf. And there's that neighborhood that has been annexed by Overland Park, the 30 acres across. And even though I didn't get a notice because I'm just like a quarter of a mile out, that's going to affect me every single day pulling out of my street, which is already a difficult street to pull out because of the slight hill. So that would affect me every single day. And I want to know what's the plan is, because I do think there needs to be a lot of, concern with traffic and safety and all that kind of stuff based on the fact that they want to put 5 houses per acre and not do the, what's considered consistent with the area or the neighborhood, which also brings in another issue. So I hear everything you're saying, but I think there's room to maybe meet in the middle somewhere, especially like and I know it's not going to be favorable for more high density areas, but when you're talking out in Stillwell, where increasing it, you're only adding maybe 10 houses, but it's impactful for those houses. And again, maybe it's on those issues where there are extraordinary situations like traffic or smell or noise or lights and those kind of things. So I do think there's, I don't think this should be an all or none by doing 1,000 versus 5,000. Maybe because 1,000 feet is only 0.19 miles. Maybe we look at what a quarter of a mile area looks like. But I just, I'd like to see what other people, because like I said, it's not always easy to know what's going on in the neighborhood. So I think neighbors are more at a disadvantage sometimes. I've been sending out stuff because we've got 3 major things going on in Stillwell, and it's amazing how many people still don't know what's going on. So I think it's more the neighbors are at a disadvantage sometimes of knowing what's going on, and to fault of their own, not paying attention. I'm not saying that, the county's not notifying them, but you get a lot of stuff. So I think this is hugely important. And I honestly feel like the more people are aware up front and they're not shocked or surprised and they get the information up front, allows them to absorb it, kind of think about it before taking a negative approach. So it can work to to be more beneficial. I know when I think it was AT&T or whoever came through and started posting flags all over the place in all of our neighborhood, in all of our yards, nobody knew what was going on. They actually were, some places they were digging ditch. They went through my underground dog fence, and everybody was like, what is going on? Because there was driveways were being sprayed. It was like, who moved in and did all this? And we don't know. Had we gotten a little bit of information up front, I don't know if you guys got calls on it. I did ask you guys if you knew what was going on, but I'm sure a lot of people were like, and especially the poor people who were contracted to come out and do that, neighbors were coming out there and just like, probably not being very nice to them. And they were just like, look, we're just contracted to do this. We don't even know who's doing this. So I'm a big believer in transparency at all costs. And I think maybe we can find something in between 1,000 and 5,000. I'd like to hear other people's opinions on that.
Craig Connell. So kind of along that line, And I think back to the Jack's Hollow thing we had on the zoning board here, last couple of months. Two things on that. One is on the notification. So in a rural part of the county where I live, and maybe that's where you live, I don't know, but our density is not so great. So 1,000 feet would get 2 neighbors, right? Kind of thing, if that. So maybe we should at least go from major intersection to major intersection, especially if it affects traffic, kind of a thing. And so that'd be like a mile, right? In my part of the county. So 1,000 feet to me is kind of works maybe great in town, but out in the country, maybe big major intersection, a mile would be a good, either side of the event would be a good notification. The other thing on the meetings, again, I think the Jack's Hollow thing that went back and forth with the Board of Commissioners, to expect someone that's having a little Halloween thing to go rent some hall to have a meeting with the neighbors and stuff doesn't seem like the right thing to me to do. I would just give them notification that this thing is gonna happen, or in front of the zoning board, and put the phone number of the person that wants to have it on there and said, if you have any questions, call them before the public hearing, public meeting, rather than making them go find a place to have a public meeting ahead of the zoning board meeting. That's my suggestion.
Any other comments or thoughts from the commissioners?
Steve McGank, I would be in agreement with extending this. 1,000 feet doesn't seem like a lot to me in most areas. And at least going to 2,000 to 2,500, somewhere in there makes sense to me.
Leslie Hind, oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Leslie Hind. I know I live at Gardner Lake, and so I have a lot of concerns with New Century and, the growth there and construction. So I would be strongly in agreement with extending that.
This is Greg Wolf, question for the staff. Does any county in Kansas go beyond the 1,000-foot requirement?
Legal did some research on that, and I can't remember all the details. I can come back. I can ask them for their research and come back with that.
I'm just curious if the more rural counties deal with this differently than we do, and how they deal with it. I'm a big believer in not reinventing the wheel. And I'd just be curious to know how others deal with this. I understand that the county has limited resources, and, I'm a lawyer. I litigated for 25 years. That does take up some resources of the county, and that's how do you deploy those resources matters. I've also seen a lot of litigation in this space over the years. The question I also have is, if we extend this, does this provide a huge incentive for developers to simply ask to be annexed into a city to overcome this issue?
Sean Penley, planning staff, that's a really good question. I will tell you, just as an example, comparing cities to county, city notice requirements 200 feet. Absolutely. If you have a property close proximity to a city limit and you're contiguous, you're absolutely going to annex in the city just to get around this requirement. I can tell you from a protest standpoint, applicants absolutely don't want any part of that. Increasing the notice, just is kind of a clarification here. So as Karen pointed out in the memo, staff's position is, the 1,000-foot is based on state statutes. So we're being consistent with state statutes for a typical notice requirement for a public hearing item. That's for the legal notice. We recommend being consistent with the state on that 1,000-foot. One of the alternatives, rather than increasing the notice requirement, a more reasonable compromise might be to require a neighborhood meeting prior to the public hearing. That could maybe change the notice area. You could possibly require a greater notice for that. That wouldn't have the same legal ramifications in terms of protest areas and legal notices going out. That's an alternative that you might want to consider. But certainly is a good point and a good question to compare other jurisdictions. I'm not aware of any other jurisdictions that require an increased notification on the legal notice, but we could certainly do that. That would be good, I think, information to share with the Planning Commission, what research we find, if there's any other jurisdictions in the state that would require that. But again, just to consider those options for other notice, we would strongly recommend considering introducing a neighborhood meeting requirement. Because again, there's a lot of different things that we haven't even talked about with different types of CUPs. What are we talking about? Just, this is an old example, but accessory buildings, would we require, increased notice for accessory buildings? We don't do that anymore, but even for simple contractor yards or simple landscape nurseries, do we make them go out? There's definitely a difference between different types of applications, and it's hard for staff to discriminate and determine when we would require an increased notice area and when we wouldn't, or is it an area rural, or is it more urban area? It's very hard. So we'd have to make something universal. So that's just my initial thoughts, but certainly great questions, comments. I would suggest staff could provide some additional information and we return at a future meeting.
And this is Karen Miller, and just a couple of things to think about. We would need a uniform buffer around the project area, just for the sake of being able to figure out what that buffer area is. We need to say like 1,000 feet from the subject property, or 2,500 feet, or 3,000 feet. So any kind of non-uniform buffer, I think, would probably be problematic. Then, as Sean was saying, the idea of are you going to require this for just all conditional use permits, or the mention was ones that cause some kind of increased effect or impact. So those probably we should look at the conditional use permits, the list, and specifically state a particular conditional use permit, and then require a standard, because we do have standards associated with conditional use permits for particular types. And then so we should make this a standard for that particular type of conditional use permit. And then the other thing to think about, do you want to require the certified notice? It's about, like, I think $8 a letter, or a postcard notification on this extra. And that's, I think, about 50 cents. So that's quite a difference. So just in my mind, thinking about, well, if we go forward with this, those are the specifics to nail down.
Keller asked, postcard, I think would be fine. You don't need to do certified, would be my opinion. But I think with all the things that have come up, at least in the Stillwell area, I think it's pretty easy to tease out which are the ones that require, even tonight there's a meeting going on. Tomorrow there's a meeting going on. Wolf Creek Elementary is very busy these days. So, I think it's fairly easy to, we're not talking a fence or, accessory buildings we don't do anymore, but, the ones that are going to create, more interest and people want to be involved. Sean, I wanted to get clarification from you. When you said that, like a neighborhood meeting, are you saying that the applicant would be responsible for sending out notices to people in a much further area? And then who would be, if he doesn't do that, or like who's going to be on top of him for doing that? And he can say he did. So that's, to me, that's a little bit problematic, because it needs to come from the county for it to be more, appropriate or mean something. So
yeah, Sean Penley, that's a good question. So just to come my background, and I can tell you from city planning perspective, all applications for public hearings require a neighborhood meeting in the city. As an example, to determine, and there were exceptions to that, certain types of application plats and plan reviews, but there were other times where it could be waived. However, if a neighborhood meeting was required, I think what we would suggest, if we're going to amend our regulations to require a neighborhood meeting, we would also include some criteria, standards that would be required as part of that. Number one, they have to give staff a copy of their neighborhood notice. Two, they have to have it X number of days in advance prior to the public hearing. And we have to have proof that they had a meeting. If they do not, they could not hold a public hearing on that item. So applicants would absolutely be encouraged to do it. If we're going to recommend that, we could absolutely set standards for what they would have to do to have the neighborhood meeting, and have to make sure that they have it in advance of the public hearing. So there's different things we could do to include in our regulations for terms of time, distance, notice?
This is Karen Miller. We've already done this with the solar regulations. Solar CUP application requires a neighborhood meeting. And so we've kind of already got language for that.
This is Greg Wolf. My experience with conditional use permits, if they don't comply with something like that, you can revoke the conditional use permit. Right? So if it's later determined they did not have a public meeting, you can revoke that's the way it works at the city level, at least for us.
Yeah, I would say for that respect, that's if a CUP were approved, but I'm saying before we even hold the public hearing on a proposed CUP, let's say we have a new requirement for a neighborhood meeting, they would have to have that neighborhood meeting and have proof that they had the meeting even before we considered the public hearing.
But hypothetically, this is Greg Wolf, if they manufactured that evidence and it was later came to light that they said, hey, county, we did do this, and then they didn't do it,
Okay.
there are consequences to that.
Yeah, that's a good question because I guess, it could be a scenario where sometimes you get an applicant say, yeah, we had a meeting and nobody showed up. And that is common actually, when there's a requirement, they send out their notice and nobody showed up. They'd have to have proof of that. And that's where we'd have to get into the question, well, is a postcard adequate or do we have to have certified mail proof? I think there's different options too, even for proof of mailing that's not a certified mail, but there might be we get some form of proof from an applicant that they in fact did mail these things and we would have a postmark, date. Yeah, that's a good question.
Fred Starrett here. I'm curious of what's the neighborhood? I think we referenced that earlier, but who determines the neighborhood? How, and what's that mean? Is that defined somewhere?
Yeah, that would be the question, I think. Yeah, what does the planning commission feel is an appropriate
Well,
definition of
I
neighborhood?
think that's
Well,
in
when
our
we do it-
golden criteria a little bit. We run into this in Stillwell when people want to come in and change the zoning. And we look at, if you've ever driven down Knoll, that dead ends to 191st, there was a situation where most of those properties are 40 acres, 20 acres, and then somebody wanted to develop and go all the way down to 3, 5, 7, just depending on how it was. And that was difficult because then down the road here, there were some 2-acre lots and stuff. So at least in our area with zoning, we really try and figure that out and sort that out. And that's where good judgment comes in, and you look at the majority of the lots that it's next to. And then it's also, you have to be careful because what this developer is proposing, if you pass on it, the next one might come up and be far worse. You know what I'm saying? So we're always very good about trying to balance that because development's going to happen. But we do look at the character of the immediate area first. And then if we feel like we need to broaden out, but there's got to be sort of judgment calls of, all right, why are we looking at this? And then do we take an average assessment of the whole area? And then we look at, is this area ever going to develop to be more 2-acre lots, or is it going to stay large 10-acre property? So it's a balancing and a juggling thing that we do in the zoning board all the time.
And this is Karen Miller. I was going to say exactly the same thing. When in the staff report that staff writes, we use our professional judgment and exactly how Commissioner Rast described it. It depends on the context of the application.
So, go ahead.
This is Fred Starrett again. So that's a case by case determination by
Yes,
staff. Is that who would do that?
yes.
And then you would
When we write our staff report and when we evaluate the character of the neighborhood, it's not explicitly defined.
And Kelly Rice, for the most part, I would feel like we've done a pretty good job, even if the developer goes back and says, okay, I'm going to take one lot out and I'll give everybody an extra acre here. So far, it seems to work itself out fairly well from what I've seen over the past year and a half.
Yes.
Chairman Gersay, so from my perspective, I just wanted to thank the planning staff for kind of raising some of these unintended consequences and ideas. To me, I think, unless anybody feels different or wants to pursue it more, my suggestion is maybe we give direction to the staff to maybe do a little bit more research into 2 options. And I think we're almost over 50% lawyers. I know I am on this board. I know that there's probably a way that we can write regulations that would maybe increase notification, but add clarity as to the exclusion zones and the protest zones. So maybe we could, my proposal would be that we instruct planning staff to both pursue a potential increase to the notice only requirement with clarity on some of the really good unintended consequences that we could perhaps add language to. And then maybe as a second would be to look at, if we were to pursue the neighborhood meeting route, what would that look like? Especially maybe we could look at what the solar regulations have already done. Does anybody have, we could do a vote on something similar, or if anybody has a suggestion for an alternative path?
Yeah, Craig Conlon, I have one more comment on the second part, which is the meetings. You know, the solar thing is obviously a commercial venture, and Jack's Hollow was some lady on a farm wanting to have a drive-through Halloween thing to raise money for charity. So there's a big difference in those kind of things. And I think we need to take that into account in these regulations. We don't want to discourage people from doing charitable things in the country because they got to go through some sort of meeting that they got to set up ahead of time. So I think we need to have some levity here about what we're really trying to do. And I'm always opposed to more regulation by government. So we need to think about what we're making people do or the kind of things they're applying for. That's my advice.
I would just like to, this is Greg Wolf. I'd like to know exactly what you typically get as far as a conditional use permit request. I think that's obviously impactful to me in terms of what the county sees.
This
Would-
Chairman Grisey, I think that would be very helpful to look at the list of the conditional use permits. I know that on the zoning board of appeals, we had a particular issue with like a racetrack and the noise concerns. And I think the other one that was raised is if there were tall lighting, like some sort of sports facility where somebody further than 0.19 miles may be impacted. So maybe also as a suggestion, I think we should have a vote on it because planning staff's gonna have to expend some more time and diligence into looking down these routes, but you know, maybe making it, to Karen's point, more narrow as to the explicit conditional use permits that maybe an extension would apply to. But I think Chairman Wolf, that's a really good point, is making sure we can look at the list of what are the options for conditional use permit.
I would like also, you know, as staff is looking at this, I think the question of what counties have instituted something beyond the statutory limits and whether or not those unintended consequences have been seen there. I'd like to see that as well.
Perfect. So I guess I could call for a vote. Do we want to, I guess I'll put it to a vote to the commissioners that we instruct the planning staff to continue investigating the options of either increasing the notification zone and maybe limiting the types and understanding the types of conditional use permits that would apply to, extending the notification zone. And then, and what would potential regulations look like that would limit the potential for people doing protest vote, petitions and other standing issues, and only limit it to notice for particular conditional use permits. And also investigate the option of what other counties have done and what the solar regulations have done on a mandatory neighborhood meeting, and understanding that for maybe a report for the next meeting or the following meeting. Longest motion.
I second whatever she said.
Sorry.
You have to repeat it.
I couldn't if I tried. Okay, can we do a quick roll call vote?
Yes. I also want to note that Commissioner Member Michael David Perderis left us at 7:43.
Okay.
Gregory Wolf.
Aye.
Michael, so skip him. 3, Kelly Rast.
Aye.
Brad Miller,
Aye.
Lindsay Grisey,
Aye.
Frederick Sterrett.
Aye.
Stephen McGank,
Perfect. Aye.
Leslie Hind,
Aye.
Craig Connell,
Aye.
Andrew Logan,
Aye.
and that would make 9 in favor.
Perfect. Should we continue on quickly to the future agenda items?
Sure. Sean Penley, planning staff. Just a note, we talked about the future items that'll be coming up next. Public hearings for the airport plans, that'll be December 19th. The public hearing date for the zoning regulations for a lot of record would be November 28th. There will also be future updates regarding the health and environment amendments to the environmental sanitary code. We're working out details and timing with the DHE staff on that update, and then also research regarding minor plats. Those are just some of the upcoming amendments. We'll also add to our list this research for CUP notification requirements and neighborhood meeting requirements. We'll add that to the list and we'll bring back a report. We'll see if that's ready in November. If not, hopefully we'll shoot for December. And that's it for our upcoming notes agenda.
I understand that we may have a quick notice and want to discuss a retirement.
Yes. Yes. Thank you, Sean Penley. We wanted to announce that our zoning assistant, Sherry Cross, is retiring after 24 years of service for Johnson County Planning. She was formerly the secretary for the Planning Commission, so she worked previously with the previous planning commissions. She's also been recently secretary for our zoning boards. And so we just wanted to announce her retirement and let the Planning Commission know about that and how much we appreciate all of her work over the years. I know some of you have worked directly with Sherry. She's the one who's been sending out previously your notices that you have, and I'm sure you had contact with her as far as membership and checking on quorum. So we wanted to announce her retirement. And also our new administrative assistant, Melissa Colasanto, is here. She is training with Leslie Davis. Melissa will be the secretary for our zoning boards, but she will also be helping out with the Planning Commission as well. So we wanted to introduce Melissa and let you know about some changes with our staff.
Fred,
go ahead.
Fred Starrett, what effective date on the retirement for Sherry?
This Friday, October 27th is Sherry's last day.
Chairman Grisey, just on behalf of all of the commissioners, both current and former, I think we've all had lots of interactions with Sherry, and she's always been incredibly polite, kind, professional, and patient with some of us throughout the years. And we're just very grateful and wish her a very happy retirement. So on that, does anybody have any old business or new business to bring to bear?
Ms. Kelly Ross, I have one question. If we, and I had talked to Jay about this or whatever, but I think one of the issues in like unincorporated area and that Stillwell has issues with is people wanting to start businesses on their properties and stuff. Why hasn't unincorporated, and is this something that we can bring up to discuss, that you have to have a business license in order to have a business? And then wouldn't that sort of overlap with a lot of the issues that are going on in at least Stillwell area that creates a lot of these neighborhood meetings and stuff like that?
Sean Penley, I will just note that a requirement for a business license would not be governed by the Planning Commission.
Oh.
That would be a requirement of the Board of County Commissioners. I'm not aware if the Board of County Commissioners has ever considered or entertained that. I know
More money for the city.
Yeah, that'd be a good question. Good question for the Board of County Commissioners. I know that.
Oh,
there
sorry,
are-
Sean Penn.
Yeah.
One question, just sorry to interrupt you, but Commissioner Brass, are you saying that as a requirement to seek a conditional use permit, you have to demonstrate a business license?
No, I was understanding from Jay that if the unincorporated required you to have a business license, then that would, maybe if I'm remembering correctly, this was quite a while, but that would, then these people that want to start their own sports business or baseball camp on their own property, they wouldn't, because it wouldn't fit into the rural zoning. They would conflict. And so that would alleviate a lot of the issues that we're seeing popping up in Stillwell, because it would be considered rural versus a rural zoning, but they want commercial. And that license would be what differentiates that. And it would just get rid of a lot of stuff that we keep seeing going on in the can of worms that is being opened up in Stillwell. Just throwing that out. So I didn't know. I asked Jay and he's like, that's what I said. It's like, is that something we bring up that there has to be a requirement?
Well,
I don't know.
this is Karen Miller. We do have home occupation standards. in our zoning regulations. And
Mhm.
so it sets forth the condition and requirements for how you can do a home occupation. For one thing, you have to live there. And then another thing is it has to be carried on wholly within a building. If it's in the home, it can't take up more than a certain percentage of the home.
Mhm.
You can't have more than, like in the rural district, more than like one employee.
Mhm.
Can't generate more than a certain number of trips. You can't have retail sales there. You can't do like a contractor's shop or yard.
Yeah, and I don't think this would, Kelly Rose, I don't think the things that we're talking about would not affect that because it's on a whole different level. So we were talking about the stuff that's trying to be developed on a whole nother level. Anyway, something to think about. I'll leave it at that.
Sure. Any other old business, new business? Okay, well, I think with that, we will adjourn to the next regularly scheduled planning commission meeting, which is Tuesday, November 28th. Thank you, guys.